Hmm, where to start? Where to start? Where to start? I just listened to a marathon of SWP, Sergeant Willie Pete, and there's so many things on the table, and I'll get to those in a moment. I'll get to the particulars in a moment. But after listening to his videos for almost a year and hearing about him by reputation for longer than that, and dealing with this Black consciousness movement for 25 years, the same two questions keep coming back over and over and over again about the Black community and Black folks. What really happened to us and why? Why are we so screwed up? Reading many books, hours of tape, lectures, videos, um, book studies, meetings, more than you can even imagine over the last 25 years. It's always trying to answer those two questions. And I thought after 25 years, we would have made progress. We'd get to it. So for 15 years, I was focused on how do we get out of this mess that we're in? Because I thought if you do that, if you focus on that, if you figured out this matrix that we're in and how to navigate it, we find avenues for Black people to get out of our condition. And after 15 years, the last couple of years, I focused in on not how do we get out of our condition, because the avenues are there for us to get out of our condition. And more and more are invented every day. So rapidly, we can't even keep up with the pace of change. But even though all these tools and techniques and avenues and pipelines and all this stuff that exists for Black people to get out of their condition, why don't they do it? What's wrong with us and why? Now, everybody gives their take on what's going on. What are we doing? What are white people doing? What's the world doing? What should we be doing? Or what we think we should be doing? And half of that stuff is garbage and half of that stuff is very good. And 10% of it is stellar. But the thing is, what we can't figure it out is if we have all these ideas, have all these avenues, we have all these good processes to get out of our condition, why aren't we doing them? If we really wanted to get out of it, how come we're not taking them? And as always, because we have not answered those two fundamental questions. What's wrong with us and why? Because those are the tough questions. What is actually wrong with us? So let me get into the first question. What's wrong with us? It's going to be a quick overview. This is going to be a frame. This is going to be Black Gnostic style. This is going to be a frame, the framework, because it would take too long to fill in all the pieces, because there are in too many books spread across all of American history, going back to the first encounter when the Spaniards and the Portuguese started coming in and taking our people and bringing us across over here to America. Talking about over 500 years of itty bitty pieces scattered throughout Europe, scattered throughout the world. Can't do it. So we're going to give this in broad strokes. The first key is we really have never focused in on culture. And I'm not talking about culture of singing, of dancing, of language or anything like that. I'm talking about hardcore culture, scientific culture, the way that academics understand it. I mean, really understand it. And later on, I'm going to post a video that I did more than a year ago to a MGTOW channel. And I'm going to repost that, talking about culture and what it is. Culture, briefly, what it is the social heritage that you pass down from person to person. Culture is the reaction of your biology, you as a human being, to the external world, whatever environment that you're in. And culture and environment and social learning from the people that pass that culture, that adaptation down to you, gives you your current behavior, the behavior of the current organism, as they say. So you have to understand what it is and how it works. And briefly, for us in particular, Black people, we imagine and we have been taught that Black people are a monolith. Black is an identity, just like white is an identity. You don't come from one culture. When they brought you here, they brought you from hundreds of different villages and hundreds of different cultures with their own practices, their own brands of religion, their own speech and language pattern. They put millions of you on a boat over hundreds of years and they ship you over to a foreign land, a foreign environment that you've never been in, that you have to adapt to with other foreign people and a completely different culture that you have to adapt to. And you have to adapt to it by force. And the only way you can do that is they can have you do that without you dying, is to shatter the culture that you came from. And as Carol Quigley says, human beings cannot live without culture. They have to adapt a culture. So what human beings do, especially conquered people, as the people that were brought here had their culture shattered, the only way that they can survive and they can push forward is to take their shattered culture and parts of the dominant culture with their environment and try to piece together a culture that actually works. So you're starting with a blended culture in the first place, coming to a foreign environment and encountering people that have their own blended culture and mixing it all together in a foreign land under very, very harsh circumstances. So after 300 years of that, they spit you out. What you have is a non-culture, basically. You have a culture that barely works. So they spit you out of slavery. They tell you to hit the ground running. Fortunately, you've been doing the work for 300 years, so you have that physical culture that you can adapt to. You can adapt to the land because you've been working it. Of course, they know that. That is the question that they had been battling with well before slavery actually ended. Whether to keep you here or send you back. President Monroe, 40 years before slavery ended, he tried an experiment, which we call Liberia, where he tried to send former slaves or slaves back to where they came from. There's a reason they didn't work, because of the Industrial Revolution. You have all this machinery, all this industry coming in to America. What does industrial capitalism need? Raw materials. You win slavery, you basically break up the South to where it's non-functioning. A non-functioning South cannot operate. It cannot give you the raw materials that you need. What do you think you have to do? You have to put slaves back onto the plantation with something akin to slavery. So you have to basically introduce another shock to their culture. And this is representative of what has gone on for our whole experience. You finally gather yourself together because of the harshness of what Jim Crow was actually doing, killing your people, lynching your people, beating your people in the street, raping your women. You gather yourself together, you make this push. And you make this demand to your country that you're not going to take this anymore. They see the threat. They see the problem. What's their idea? Their idea is not to empower the culture that you're developing. Their idea is to push you into a more foreign culture that's been basically kept you out for 400 years, which is the white collective. And the only way this can be done is to be done by force. So they send you to white schools. They bus you to white schools. They allow you to live in white neighborhoods. They allow you to date white girls. You think that is to help you? No, it is to strip you further of your culture. So while you think that they're trying to separate you from the white collective, It's the exact opposite. They're trying to blend you into the white collective so that the black will disappear, so that the problem will not be there anymore. That's part of the why. They need to solve the problem. If you understand that, if you understand what's happening to you because of culture, because of this, they understand this because they talk about it all the time. If you don't understand culture, you don't understand demographics, you can't understand the Moynihan report. You think the Moynihan report was putting you down? It was not. The Moynihan report was not for you. Was not designed to tell you what was wrong with you. It was designed to tell President Johnson and his leadership and Congress what was the objective that they wanted, which was to get rid of the black problem, which was to integrate you into the white collective. And he was telling them what the barriers were. And we're going to go over this because I'm going to go over the Moynihan report in future videos, telling them what the barriers were to actually push you into the white collective, because they were going to do it by force. Get rid of the American dilemma, which is the color line problem that Du Bois had talked about 80 years before. So what we have now is a forced integration. And you think integration has stopped because they don't bust you anymore. Affirmative action, as we know it, is dead. They don't let you have contracts. And we think that forced integration has stopped. It has not. If you think so, all you got to look to is the major cities. And Sergeant Willie Pete, you live in Philadelphia. They call that what? Gentrification. They're breaking up all the traditional black neighborhoods. They're forcing you into little bitty pockets to where you will be absorbed. You can't absorb a big block. Any man of science knows if you're in chemistry, if you have a big glob of something, it's very difficult to break it up and absorb it into whatever. If the smaller pieces that you have of anything, the easier it is to absorb. What are they doing? They're breaking up the big blocks of black culture. They want it to disappear. Or the parts of it they can't use, they want it to disappear. But that's the broad brush. That's the what is wrong with it. There's other pieces that can go into this, but that's the what. We're going to go into the why. Why are they doing this? It's just like Einstein says, the simplest answer is the one that's probably correct. The simplest answer is the Industrial Revolution. When we think of the Industrial Revolution, we think, okay, it made our lives better. It changed the way we do business. It gave us more products. And that's the positive things that we see about the Industrial Revolution. We don't see the negatives of the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution changed the way human beings have basically lived since they've been on this planet. Human beings up to 250 years ago were always tied to the land in some shape, form, or fashion. Human labor was always tied to production, always has been. Food, clothing, shelter, water, whatever it is, it was tied to either nature, it was tied to human production. So there never was an unemployment problem. There never was a job shortage. What there was a shortage of was labor. If you look at any Survivor series where they drop people off in the middle of nowhere with minimal technology, you see how they have to struggle just to get enough calories to stay alive. It's a daily struggle. So that limits human population. It always has. The Industrial Revolution changed that. And by changing the environment, changing the way human labor is tied to human production and human survival, it changed the way you have to govern people. And the only thing is, you don't have a playbook because the previous millions of years, can't be relied on because you don't know what will work and what won't. On top of that, the environment has always been the limiting factor to how many people were produced and actually or live to human population. The Industrial Revolution changed all that. It took 2 million years. It took 2 million years to get to the first billion people. And I do believe that was in 1830. It's taken less than 200 years to add another almost 8 billion, almost 7 billion onto that first billion. How does a government control that? How does a governments that have been set up for hundreds of people and at the most thousands of people operate when you have millions of people? How does the government operate when information and language and tools and weapons were limited to a few hundred people? Armies, a huge army was no more than 10,000 men. 500 years ago, 10,000 men was a huge army because it took so much resources to produce it. Now you got, after the Industrial Revolution, you got millions of people getting killed in an armed struggle. Millions. How does the government manage that? How does the government manage all this stuff? That is the why. It ain't just us. It's the whole world trying to be managed by their governments. We are just the bottom of that bucket. We're more problematic because we trying to be integrated into an alien culture, so we're more problematic. But the thing is, when you put that against the backdrop of the environment of the Industrial Revolution and the artificial environments and urban environments that are being created, that's where you get the why. The people on the farms that are black people don't have the same problems that the people in the urban community has. You don't have the same problems between women and men in a small rural community that you have in Chicago or Philly or New York or LA or Miami. They're not the same. All these things impact your culture. All these things impact the psyche of a human being. Human beings were not meant to live in communities larger than 5,000 people. Your biology says that you can't live in such a large community. Now you have to live in community of millions of people. You have to live with 50,000 people within a radius of a mile or two, a square mile or two. Your psyche cannot handle that. So you're going to have people break. You're going to have people break down. And then if you economically deprive them of work, of the ability to feed themselves, you're going to have more problems. When you're trying to integrate them into a white culture, as you, Sergeant Willie Pete, was trying, you have a dissonance. I was brought up in a particular culture. I was socialized to think a certain way. When I get out into the real world, it ain't that way. So now you have a psychological dissonance. You don't understand what happened to you. You don't understand what happened to you because you don't understand what happened to us. And if you don't understand what happened to us, then you come with the question, why don't we? Why don't they? Because you haven't understood the underlying problem. And once you get to the underlying problem, you got to get to the people that set up the underlying problem, their agenda. And when you get to their agenda, then you got to get to the why they're actually doing it in the first place. And what you're talking about is the surface layer, that the people that we've been talking about for 40 years. You're not coming up with anything new. Try to break some ground. Now, the second part that I'm going to get to. It's not the past. It's not the why. It's not what happened to us. It's not even the what will we do, because nobody can predict that. I can't predict that. Because when you mix what happened to us, our culture, and our current environment, which is unstable, which has been unstable for 200 years, you can't predict what's going to happen in the next 20, much less 100. Because in the past 200 years, what the United States has been for 200 years, it will not be in the next 50. What Europe has been in the last 500 years is not going to be in the next 50. But that's another video. So we're not going to talk what will we do or what will happen. We're going to talk about what can we do. Now, hopefully in later videos, because I'm going to not do so many rants, I'm going to get into specifics, which is hopefully is more helpful. People respond to rants more. I think the detailed information helps them, or help the few that actually want to be helped. What can we do? First thing we can do is stop looking at what happened. Okay, we can understand it. The only reason we looked at what happened is so we can understand what we can do, understand what happened to us, and get a basis of where we're at. Because you can't walk in a direction and navigate until you find out where you're at. The first thing when you get into a unknown situation, an unknown piece of land, the first thing you have to do is find out where you're at. If you look on a map, you can have 100 maps. If you don't know where you're at, they do you no good. First thing you have to find out where you're at. That's what the past does. That's what all that information about culture and everything else in the past actually do. Find out where you're at. So once we know where we're at, then we can figure out which direction we want to walk. Where we're at now is we're on the cusp of a great change that's been happening underneath our eyes, because we're looking at cell phones, we're looking at iPhones and computers, and Facebook is just so addictive, and the chats, so the YouTube is so addictive. We don't realize that they're avenues. Those are tools. They're not channels. They're not entertainment. They're not telephones or microphones. They're tools. How do you use the new tools that you have? And these are just the obvious ones. The digital revolution is entering into its golden age and is opening up so many avenues and has so many tools that most people can't even fathom it, because it's overwhelming. The biological revolution is just in its infancy, and it's going to start feeling its impact in about 5 years. It's already doing it underneath the surface, but the impact hasn't really been felt in a broad way yet. But we're just going to talk about the avenues we have just in the digital revolution. We're talking about, because most of the things that we talk about are psychological, persuading people, connecting with people. And the most powerful tool you have for that sits in your pocket, most people's pocket right now. If you think about it, and most millennials, especially Gen Xers and millennials, can't even fathom it. What you can do with that little piece of technology, that little smartphone that you think nothing of, that sits in your pocket, replaces thousands of pounds of equipment and millions of dollars of technology to connect people up to. You basically have the power of a broadcast network in your pocket, and most people don't even use it. Most people don't even think of it that way. We think of it as just cell phone. It's just a kid's toy for the most part. Most people treat it like a kid's toy. You don't go beyond that, because you've been taught to think and taught to be inside that box. Because every problem that Sergeant Willie P talks about can basically be solved with the technology that you already have. Everything you talk about, how do you change people's minds? You got the technology to do it. The thing is, you don't have the will and the knowledge to go along with it to wield these tools. We need the big guys, the stars and whatnot, to finance these movies and blah, 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 on and on and on and on and on. If you got local actors, you got a little bit of technology, which a Samsung Galaxy and a stabilizer will do 90% of what you need to make a film. That's not good enough. You need something better. Blackmagic makes a pocket cinema camera that's less than $1,000. that they're making films with. You can go online right now and you can look at high definition films that you can't tell weren't filmed with a red camera, which rivals a red camera. All you need is elbow grease, a few volunteers, and some will. That's all you need. You have a couple of actors, an iPhone or a Samsung Galaxy or whatever phone that you think you might, a little few pieces of software, some elbow grease and some knowledge. You can make a film. You can make a documentary. You can put forth exactly the ideas that you want to get out there. Can you make them compelling? Do you have the will to push it forward? Years ago, to make a small grainy film, and I know because I have a friend that did it. He did it 25 years ago. It took him $100,000 and it took him 5 years to make an hour-long film. If you look at those old rap videos, it took $15,000. It took a camera and a crew to go out there and actually make that film. You can do it for $150. You can, if you already have the cell phone and the talent, you can basically do it for $150. If you add a $200 stabilizer, you can replace $10,000 worth of equipment. You want to spend another $500 or $1,000 and get your DJI, you can replace a $200,000 helicopter and get the same shots. So if you want to take a couple $1,000 or even $5,000, if you want to be generous, some volunteers in $2,000 or $3,000 in equipment, you can make a Hollywood movie if you wanted to. That's just entertainment. That's just getting your ideas out. You don't even need that to make a documentary. If you want to give it away for free, you can put it up on YouTube. That can be your distribution point. Your advertising is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Level playing field, the same avenues that NBC uses or CBS uses or Sony, the exact same thing. You have the same access to the information that the Fortune 500 companies have. They have more people to dig for it, but if you're willing to put in the elbow grease, you can find it. If you don't believe me, go read the book Bold, where he talks about billionaires that have used tools to level the playing field and become billionaires. And all they had was the tools that were on the ground and what's in their head. They literally cast down the buckets where they were. The solutions are right there in front of your face. But you got to let go of that psychological leash that you've been put into by your feminist, white, socialist educational system. We're not even going to get into that. But if you want a heads up and you want to talk about it, not talk about it, you want to find out about it, look up the Prussian school system on Google. Anybody can do it. If you're on YouTube, key in John Taylor Gatto. He talks about it all the time. Those are just a few things that you can do. There's many, many, many more that you can do. Your market is local, but your reach is global. How do you how do you make a black billionaire? How does one become a black billionaire? Convince everybody in the world to give you $1. You have 5 billion adults in the world. If you can figure out what they need or what they like, and they all like you, everybody in the world will give you $1. You become a multi-billionaire overnight. Now that's an extreme case, but that shows you the reach that you have. But our culture, what we've been through, our experience, the constraints that have been put upon us keep us psychologically, not physically, but psychologically in this box. Keep us psychologically dependent. Keep us psychologically afraid. Well, if you was really bold and you really had guts, you was real man, you go out and you fight these fucking police. If you're really bold, you really had guts, you really had knowledge, and you're really unafraid, you get the fuck up out of, get your passport, get the fuck up out of this country and go make your fortune someplace else. That takes guts. That takes bravery. That takes heart. Scariest thing is to be halfway around the world, 5,000-6,000 miles from home, where you don't know the language, you don't know the terrain, and you're in an environment that you weren't prepared for. That takes guts. That takes boldness to actually be able to do that. That takes planning. And only a handful of black people can even think about doing that. Whether you go there to stay or you don't go there to stay, you don't even go there to do business because we've been put in this box. White boy get on a plane in a minute with his suitcase, knowing he can't speak the language. He gonna go there and do business because that's what he's been taught. He's been taught that the world is his oyster. And he truly believes that because that's what his culture tells him. Ours don't, because we don't have one. We have this patched up, rickety machine, a car, vehicle that we call a culture, that every time we hit a bump, something falls off. Or every time we hit a rock, we got to get out and patch up the tire. But instead of getting out and trying to fix the car, improve the car, we're worried about a destination. And we get into things that we can't handle because guess what? We haven't fixed the car. So the avenues and the roads that are open to us, we don't take, or we can't take, because we're ill prepared. The vehicle is ill prepared to drive us down that road. And that's just the road. We're not even talking about off-road, which is going into a different country, a different culture. We're not even prepared for that because we don't stop and fix the car. We don't stop and fix the car collectively, and we definitely don't stop and fix the car individually. But this has already been a two-parter. I'm sure there's more to come. I probably could talk for hours. I don't even know how this is going to come across, because this is not an angry rant. It's not even out of frustration. I think it's more out of weariness. I just saw the video of that kid getting shot down like a dog in Chicago. And as a black man, it made me weary, because you just get tired. And I think most black people are just tired. We've been fighting the struggle for 300 years, and I think black people are just tired. Their foreparents have done it. Their grandparents have done it. Their parents have done it. And now they have to do it. And they're just tired. I think I'll end it with that.